Have you ever wondered what happens when a powerful man, accustomed to having everything in life, discovers that the person he despises the most may be exactly who he needs the most? What if I told you that this discovery happened in the most unexpected way possible, involving a dance that changed the life of an entire family forever? Stay with me until the end, because this story will make you question everything you think about judging people by their appearance. And I guarantee you will never forget what happened that Tuesday afternoon in Sao Paulo. Gustavo Vior was 45 years old and had everything money could buy. His mansion in Marumbi occupied an entire block with gardens that looked more like a park, swimming pools that rivaled five-star resorts, and a garage that housed 15 imported cars. Heir to a pharmaceutical empire that his grandfather had built from scratch, Gustavo never had to worry about money, never had to fight for anything, never even had to consider that other people might have real problems. He was the kind of man who wore $3,000 suits to go to the bakery, who changed his cell phone every 2 months because he got tired of the color, and who treated employees like expensive but expendable furniture. He was 6'1" tall, with perfectly combed hair and a smile that looked more like a sharp blade. Gustavo Vitor had turned arrogance into an art form. He didn't talk to people. He granted audiences. He didn't ask for favors. He gave orders. And if you weren't on the same social level as him, you simply didn't exist. But even powerful men have their weaknesses. And Gustavo's was called Tatiana. His 12-year-old daughter was everything to him. The only human being in the world capable of softening that heart of stone. Tatiana had been born with a rare neurological condition that severely affected her motor coordination. She couldn't walk without support. Her legs trembled constantly, and doctors had said she would never have a normal life. For Gustavo, who controlled everything and everyone around him, having a daughter with limitations that he couldn't buy a solution for was an open wound that never healed. For years, he hired the best specialists in the world. He spent fortunes on experimental treatments in Switzerland, Germany, and the United States. He turned one of the rooms in his mansion into a mini clinic with physical therapy equipment that cost more than an entire house, but nothing worked. Tatiana continued to depend on walkers, wheelchairs, and other people to move around. And that consumed Gustavo inside, because for the first time in his life, all his money and power were useless. Frustration made him even more bitter. He fired physical therapists weekly, yelled at renowned doctors as if they were incompetent interns, and took his anger out on any employee who crossed his path. The mansion became a minefield where people walked on tiptoes, afraid of arousing the fury of their boss, who watched his daughter waste away without being able to do anything about it. It was in this tense environment that Alessandra Cardoso began working in the house. She was 42 years old, 5'5" tall, and always wore her hair in a simple bun that highlighted her tired but still beautiful face. Her clothes were always the same. 3 navy blue maid's uniforms that she had sewn herself, black shoes, worn but clean, and hands calloused from a lifetime of hard work since childhood. Alessandra lived in a tiny 2-story house in the city of Tiradentes, on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, in one of those neighborhoods where houses are squeezed together and every inch of space is precious. She shared the 40-mounted metro house with her 78-year-old mother, who had been bedridden for 3 years after a stroke, and her 2 children. João, 17, was in his last year of high school at a public school, and Maria Clara, 14, dreamed of studying medicine but knew that her family could barely afford the bus fare to school. Every day, Alessandra woke up at 4:30 a.m. She prepared breakfast, gave her mother her medication, helped bathe the elderly woman, left food ready for her children's lunch, took 2 buses and a subway to cross the entire city, and arrived at the Marumbi mansion at 7 o'clock sharp. She cleaned 14 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 3 living rooms, and 2 kitchens. She took care of the clothes of a family that changed clothes 3 times a day and still had to put up with the yelling of a boss who treated her as if she were invisible. Gustavo never bothered to learn her name. To him, she was just the new maid, another in a long line of employees who came and went from the house like faceless, personality-less figures. She was just another object he had bought to make his life more convenient, like the imported toaster or the German vacuum cleaner. When he needed something, he pointed at her and gave orders. When he didn't need her, she simply ceased to exist. What Gustavo didn't know was that Alessandra was watching him. She saw how he treated his daughter with desperate tenderness, how his eyes filled with tears when Tatiana struggled to take 3 steps with her walker, how he locked himself in his office after physical therapy sessions and spent hours staring out the window with an expression of complete defeat. Alessandra recognized that look because she herself had once had the same look in her eyes. When the doctors said that her mother would never speak or walk again, she worked in the house in silence for 3 months, doing her job without complaining about the shouting, the veiled insults, the way Gustavo ignored her as if she were a ghost. She needed the job. The salary was 3 times higher than any other domestic job she could get. And with her mother needing expensive medication and her children studying, she swallowed her pride and pretended not to hear when her boss complained in front of visitors that these people didn't know how to work properly. But Alessandra had a secret she didn't even share with her children, which she kept locked in her heart like a precious and dangerous treasure. 20 years ago, before she was a mother, before life tightened its grip around her like a noose around her neck, Alessandra had been one of the best physical therapy students at the University of Sao Paulo. She had graduated second in her class, specialized in pediatric neurology, and worked for 5 years at the Hospital das Clínicas, caring for children with exactly the same problem Tatiana had. She understood neural stimulation, motor coordination techniques, and proprioceptive exercises that could work miracles when applied correctly. She had seen dozens of children overcome limitations that doctors considered permanent. She had developed her own methods that combined traditional physical therapy with therapeutic dance, using music and movement to reconnect the brain and muscles in ways that medical books could not even imagine. But life does not ask if you are prepared before it collapses on top of you. The father of her children had disappeared into the world when Maria Clara was still in her crib, leaving only debts and broken promises. Her mother had her first stroke at age 55, still too young to die, but too old to recover completely. Alessandra had to choose between her promising career and her broken family, and the choice was too obvious to cause any doubt. She left the hospital, sold all her physical therapy books to buy medicine, and started working as a maid because it was the only job that allowed flexible hours to care for a sick mother and 2 babies. 20 years passed like 20 minutes. When she realized it, she was cleaning the floor of a rich man's house, while his daughter suffered from exactly the kind of problem she could solve with her eyes closed. Every time she saw Tatiana struggling with the walker, her heart ached. She recognized every symptom, every difficulty, every little bit of progress the girl made. She also saw the glaring mistakes made by the expensive physical therapists, the outdated techniques they used, the lack of creativity in the exercises that made everything torture for a 12-year-old who just wanted to play like the others. But who was she to say anything? She was just the maid, a woman who cleaned bathrooms and swept floors. Gustavo barely looked her in the face when he gave orders. Never, not even in 100 years, would he listen to suggestions from someone like her about the health of his precious daughter. During those 3 months, Alessandra developed a silent routine of observation. While cleaning the physical therapy room, she noticed which exercises worked best for Tatiana and which ones only frustrated her. When she vacuumed the hallway, she listened to the conversations between Gustavo and the doctors and pretended she didn't understand anything, when in fact she understood every technical word, every diagnosis, every discouraging prognosis. She saw that Tatiana was an intelligent and cheerful girl by nature, but that she was becoming increasingly sad and withdrawn as the treatments failed to work. The girl had stopped trying, had given up dreaming of the day when she could run or dance like the girls at school, and that hurt Alessandra more than any humiliation her boss imposed on her. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday in September. Gustavo had left for a meeting at the office, and his wife, Marcia, was at the mall with her friends, probably spending in one afternoon what Alessandra earned in 6 months. The physical therapist on duty had canceled the session at the last minute, citing some personal problem that sounded more like an excuse to avoid another day of yelling from her dissatisfied boss. Tatiana was alone in the physical therapy room, sitting in her wheelchair, looking out the window with that heartbreaking expression of sadness. She wore a pink dress with unicorn prints, had curly brown hair tied back with a yellow bow, and in her light brown eyes shone an intelligence that contrasted painfully with the limitations of her body. Lysandra was cleaning the room next door when she heard a soft sob. She stopped wiping and listened carefully for another sob. The girl was crying alone, trying not to make a sound so no one would hear her. Alessandra's heart broke. She knew that cry. It was the cry of someone who had given up on their dreams, who had accepted that some things would never change. She had cried like that when the doctor said her mother would never recognize her again. She had cried like that when she realized she would never work as a physical therapist again. She had cried like that when she understood that her children would grow up watching their mother clean other people's houses. Without thinking twice, she dropped the cloth and entered the physical therapy room. "Tatiana, sweetie, why are you crying like that all alone?" The girl looked up, startled. No one ever talked to her except her parents, doctors, and private teachers. Certainly no maid had ever spoken to her so kindly. "I'm not crying," she lied, drying her eyes with the back of her hand. Lysandra crouched down in front of the wheelchair, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. "Of course you are, sweetheart. And it's okay to cry. Sometimes we need to cry to get the sadness out of our chest." Tatiana looked at her curiously. The maid had a different way of talking to her. She didn't use that artificial voice that adults always used, as if she were a porcelain doll that could break at any moment. "You won't tell my dad, will you?" Tatiana asked fearfully. "Of course not, dear. Whatever you tell me will stay between the two of us." And that's how the most unlikely friendship in the world began. Tatiana, accustomed to being treated like a fragile flower, found in Alessandra someone who talked to her like a normal person. Alessandra, in turn, found in the girl the daughter she had always wanted to have the opportunity to care for properly. Over the following weeks, whenever Gustavo and Marcia went out, Alessandra would spend a few minutes talking to Tatiana. They talked about school, the books the girl liked to read, the movies she watched. Tatiana discovered that the maid was much smarter than she had imagined, and Alessandra discovered that the girl was much stronger and braver than she appeared. But it was on a Thursday afternoon that everything changed forever. Gustavo had traveled to Brasilia for a meeting with politicians about new medicines. Marcia was shopping on Oscar Freire Street. The house was unusually quiet, with only Alessandra and Tatiana present. The girl was particularly sad because she had tried to walk with her walker in the morning and had fallen, hurting her knee and her pride. Alessandra found Tatiana crying in the physical therapy room, and this time she couldn't just comfort her with words. "Tatiana, can I ask you something?" The girl felt her sniffling. "Would you like to try a different exercise? Something that none of your physical therapists have ever tried?" Tatiana looked at her suspiciously. "What's the point?" "To see if we can make your legs remember how good it feels to move." Without waiting for an answer, Alessandra went to the stereo in the room and put on some soft music. It was a slow waltz, the kind that seems to float in the air. "Do you know what therapeutic dance is, Tatiana?" The girl shook her head. "It's when we use music to teach the body to move in a new way. The brain gets distracted by the melody and forgets to tell the legs that they can't function properly." Alessandra reached out her hand to Tatiana. "Would you like to try it with me?" "But I can't walk properly," Tatiana protested. "You don't have to walk, dear. Dancing isn't about walking. It's about feeling the music and letting your body respond." With infinite delicacy, Alessandra helped Tatiana out of her wheelchair. The girl leaned on her, trembling with fear and expectation at the same time. "Now let's just sway to the rhythm of the music. You don't have to lift your feet off the ground. Just let your body feel the sound." And something magical happened. As the music filled the room, Tatiana began to relax. Her muscles, always tense with anxiety and fear of falling, began to soften. Alessandra held her securely, guiding gentle movements that didn't force anything, just suggested possibilities. "Can you feel how the music enters your body, Tatiana?" The girl felt surprised. She was really feeling something different. Her muscles weren't screaming in pain or frustration. On the contrary, they seemed to be remembering how good it felt to move without struggle. Alessandra, using all the knowledge she had accumulated through years of study and experience, began to apply proprioceptive techniques disguised as play. She had Tatiana shift her weight from one leg to the other to the rhythm of the music, activating neural connections that had been neglected by conventional methods. "Let's try to lift your right foot just a little, as if you were stepping on a very soft cloud." Tatiana tried, and, to her absolute surprise, she succeeded. Not much, not for long, but she did it. I did it, she shouted with her eyes shining. Yes, you did, my love. Now let's try the left one. For 20 minutes, they danced together in that room. Tatiana could hardly believe what was happening. Her muscles were responding in a way she had never experienced before. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like a normal child, but it was real, tangible, exciting progress. Alexandra knew exactly what she was doing. Each movement was calculated to stimulate specific muscle groups. Each change of rhythm was designed to challenge Tatiana's nervous system in ways that traditional exercises did not. She was applying 20 years of accumulated knowledge, disguised as play. When the music ended, Tatiana was smiling in a way she hadn't smiled in months. How do you know how to do this? She asked, still panting with excitement. Alessandra hesitated. She couldn't tell fear or the truth. Gustavo would never believe her, and even if he did, he would probably fire her for daring to touch his daughter without permission. I learned a few things when I took care of my sick mother, she said, which wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Can you do this with me again tomorrow? Alessandra looked into those eyes full of hope and couldn't say no. If you promise it will be our secret. Yes, I promise, Tatiana exclaimed, and so began a secret routine that would change their lives forever. Every time Gustavo and Marcia went out, Alessandra turned the physical therapy room into a dance studio. She used different music, sometimes classical, sometimes pop, sometimes even samba, depending on which muscle groups she wanted to work. Tatiana began to progress in a way that surprised even Alessandra. The girl had an impressive willpower and a learning ability that was being wasted by conventional methods. In 2 weeks, she was able to stand without support for almost a minute. In 3, she could take 5 steps in a row without help. But the most important thing was what was happening to Tatiana's spirit. She was smiling again, dreaming again, believing again that maybe her life could be different from what everyone said it would be. Alexandra, can I tell you a secret? Tatiana asked one afternoon, after a particularly productive session. Of course, sweetheart. Every night I dream that I'm dancing on a big stage in a white ball gown, and everyone is applauding. Alessandra felt her eyes fill with tears. And you know what I think about that dream? What? That one day it could come true? Do you really think so? I'm sure of it. The problem is that secrets, no matter how well kept, have a life of their own. And this secret was growing too fast to remain hidden for long. Gustavo was beginning to notice changes in Tatiana. She was happier, more energetic, more confident. The doctors who were treating her commented that her reflexes were better, that she showed more balance during exams. No one could explain the sudden progress. The following Friday, Gustavo canceled an important meeting because he wanted to observe his daughter's physical therapy session in person. But when he got home, the physical therapist said that Tatiana had asked to postpone the session, claiming she was tired. Finding her behavior strange, Gustavo decided to go up to his daughter's room, but she wasn't there. He heard soft music coming from the physical therapy room and went to investigate. What he saw through the crack in the half-open door changed his life forever. Tatiana was standing without any support, moving gracefully to the sound of a waltz, and beside her, guiding each movement with a delicacy that bordered on artistry, was Alessandra, the invisible maid, whose name he barely knew. His daughter was dancing, really dancing, not the limited, frustrated movements of traditional exercises, but a real, fluid, beautiful dance. And she was smiling in a way he hadn't seen in years. Gustavo stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. The woman he treated like furniture was doing something with his daughter that the world's leading experts had said was impossible. How was this happening? Who was this woman? What else did he not know about the people around him? But before he could decide what to do, the office phone rang and he had to take an urgent call. When he returned 20 minutes later, the room was empty. Tatiana was in her room doing homework, and Alessandra was in the kitchen preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. Gustavo spent the entire night awake, trying to process what he had seen. His worldview had been shaken so violently that he couldn't even begin to organize his thoughts. The next morning, he made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find out who Alessandra Cardoso really was. Gustavo Victor hadn't gotten where he was by being careless. When he wanted information about someone, he knew exactly how to get it. On Monday morning, before even having breakfast, he called Roberto Mendez. the private investigator he had used on other occasions to investigate employees suspected of theft or dubious business partners. Roberto, I need a full investigation into one of my employees. Name, Alessandra Cardoso. I want to know everything. Where she was born, where she studied, where she worked, who she associates with, how much she owes. How much does she earn? What kind of clothes does she wear to sleep? All right, Mr. Victor, when do you need this information? Yesterday, the detective laughed, accustomed to the impatience of his millionaire client. I'll start today. In 48 hours, you'll have a full report. But Gustavo couldn't wait 48 hours. The image of Tatiana dancing with the maid wouldn't leave his head. How was it possible that a woman he paid to clean bathrooms knew exactly how to help his daughter, in a way that the best specialists in the world couldn't? He began to look at Lysandra with new eyes. During meals, when she served the food, he noticed that she moved her hands with almost surgical precision. When she organized Tatiana's medications on the tray, he noticed that she read the labels with an attention that went beyond simple checking. And when the physical therapists came for their sessions, he noticed that she always found an excuse to walk through the room as if she were evaluating the professional's work. On Tuesday afternoon, Gustavo made an impulsive decision. He told Marcia he had an urgent meeting, but instead of leaving the house, he hid in the second-floor office, where he had a perfect view of the physical therapy room through an internal window that no one knew existed. As he expected, half an hour after his supposed departure, Alessandra appeared in the room with Tatiana. He watched, fascinated and shocked at the same time, as the maid transformed physical therapy exercises into something that seemed more like art than medicine. She knew exactly which muscles to stimulate, new techniques he had never seen any professional use, and had an understanding of Tatiana's condition that was simply impossible for someone without training. When she made Tatiana take 7 consecutive steps without any support, Gustavo had to hold on to his chair to keep from falling. His daughter had just done something that doctors said was impossible, and she was doing it with a woman he thought could barely read. Who the hell was Alessandra Cardoso? The answer came on Wednesday night in the form of a 20-page report that Roberto delivered personally. Senor Victor, you won't believe what I've found out, said the detective with an expression that showed he was still processing the information. Gustavo opened the report and began to read. The first page contained the basic information he already knew. Full name, address, age, family composition. But the second page made him choke on the whiskey he was drinking. Alessandra Cardoso Siqueira graduated in physical therapy from the University of Sao Paulo in 2003, specializing in pediatric neurology at the Hospital das Clínicas in 2004. 5 years of experience in the neurological rehabilitation sector of the HC, with a specific focus on children with congenital motor disorders. Published 3 articles in specialized journals on innovative techniques in pediatric physical therapy. She left the profession in 2009 for unspecified personal reasons. Gustavo had to reread the paragraph 3 times to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. The woman who cleaned his house was a physical therapist who graduated from the best university in the country, specializing in exactly the area Tatiana needed, and with practical experience at the best public hospital in Sao Paulo. How was this possible? Why was a qualified professional working as a domestic worker? What had happened in 2009 that made her abandon her career? He continued reading, and the answers came like punches to the stomach. The report showed that Alessandra had stopped working as a physical therapist the same year her mother had suffered her first stroke. At the time, she was raising 2 young children alone after her husband had disappeared, leaving only debts behind. Between caring for an invalid mother, 2 babies, and working inflexible hospital hours, she had been forced to choose, and she had chosen her family. For 13 years, she had worked as a maid, cook, nanny, anything that paid the bills and allowed flexible hours to care for her sick mother. She had lost the house she was paying for. She lived in a rented townhouse that cost half her salary and supported a family of 4 with what she earned cleaning other people's homes. But what shocked Gustavo the most was discovering that Alessandra had tried to return to physical therapy several times over the years. The report showed that she had sent resumes to dozens of hospitals and clinics, but 13 years out of the job market is an eternity in medicine. No one wanted to hire a physical therapist who had spent her time caring for her family instead of updating her knowledge and gaining experience. She was overqualified for basic positions and underqualified for specialized ones. It was as if she were invisible in her own field, just as she was invisible in his home. The report also revealed details that broke Gustavo's heart. Alessandra had sold all her physical therapy equipment to pay for her mother's treatment. She had sold her textbooks, her framed certificates, even her diploma to get money for the expensive medications the elderly woman needed to take daily. Her children were excellent students. João, the eldest, had ranked third in the NM exam at the public school where he studied, but had not been able to enter a federal university because he could not afford the preparatory course. Maria Clara dreamed of studying medicine, but knew that her family could not afford even a public course, as she would need to stop working to study. Alessandra earned $200 per month at Gustavo's house. She paid $800 in rent, $200 for her mother's medication, $150 for transportation to work, and had $50 left over for food, clothes, and any emergencies that might arise. She had lost 15 kilos in the last year because she often skipped lunch so that there would be enough food for her children. And even so, despite living in this desperate situation, she had never stolen a cent from the house where she worked, never asked for a loan, never complained about her salary or the humiliations. She had just done her job with dignity and competence, while silently watching her Beasa's daughter struggle with exactly the kind of problem she could solve effortlessly. Gustavo closed the report and stared into space for a whole hour. His worldview had been so violently imploded that he couldn't even begin to put the pieces back together. For 3 months, he had treated one of the most qualified people he had ever met like trash. He had humiliated, ignored, and disrespected a woman who was sacrificing her own life to care for her family and who had exactly the knowledge needed to help Tatiana in a way that no private doctor had been able to. Worse still, she was helping Tatiana behind his back, knowing that if she were discovered, she would likely be fired for meddling in matters that were none of her business. Even so, she took the risk because she saw a child suffering and couldn't remain indifferent. What kind of person had he become? How had he reached the point of being so blind, so arrogant, so completely incapable of seeing the value of the people around him? On Thursday morning, Gustavo canceled all his meetings and stayed home watching Alessandra work. But now he saw a completely different person. He saw the precision with which she moved objects, the result of years of handling delicate medical equipment. He saw the care with which she organized the medications because she understood what each one was for. He saw the special care with which she treated anything related to Tatiana because she recognized the symptoms and knew exactly what care was needed. How could he have been so stupid? How could he have wasted so much time paying fortunes to incompetent people when the solution was right in front of him, cleaning the floor of the house? But what tormented him most? It was a question he couldn't stop asking himself. If Alessandra was so qualified, if she knew so much about Tatiana's condition, why had she never said anything? Why hadn't she officially offered to help? The answer made him feel so deeply ashamed that he became physically nauseous. She had never said anything because he would never listen to a maid, because he had made it clear from day one that she was invisible, that her opinion didn't matter, that she existed only to serve. She had protected his pride by remaining invisible, even though she knew she could help Tatiana in a revolutionary way. She had chosen to continue being treated like trash rather than risk being humiliated for daring to suggest that she knew more than the expensive doctors. And yet, even though she was treated like nothing, she had found a way to help secretly, without expecting recognition, without asking for anything in return. Gustavo spent the night from Thursday to Friday awake, pacing around the office like a caged animal. He needed to do something. He needed to correct the monstrous injustice he had committed. But how? How could he make up for 3 months of humiliation? How could he apologize for being so blind and cruel? On Friday morning, he made a decision. "Alessandra, I need to talk to you in my office." The woman felt her heart race. Whenever a boss asked to talk in the office, it meant dismissal. What had she done wrong? Had someone found out about the secret sessions with Tatiana? "Excuse me, Mr. Victor," she said, entering the luxurious office for the first time in 3 months of work. Gustavo pointed to one of the Italian leather chairs that cost more than her annual salary. "Please, have a seat." Alessandra sat on the edge of the chair with her hands clasped in her lap, trying to control her nervousness. Gustavo watched her for a moment, seeing for the first time not an employee, but a woman. A tired woman, too thin, with worry lines around her eyes, but with a dignity in her shoulders that all the money in the world couldn't buy. "Alessandra," he began, and then stopped, not knowing how to continue. "Did I do something wrong, Mr. Victor?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No, Alessandra, I'm the one who did something wrong." She looked at him, not understanding. Gustavo took a deep breath and decided to be direct. "I know you're a physical therapist." Alessandra's face turned completely pale. She lowered her head, preparing for the worst. "I know you graduated from USP, worked at the Hospital das Clínicas, and specialized in pediatric neurology. I know you gave up your career to take care of your mother and your children. And I know you've been helping Tatiana behind my back. Mr. Victor, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything." "Alessandra, I'm the one who needs to explain." She raised her head in surprise. "I need to explain how I could have been so stupid, so arrogant, so completely blind, to the point of not recognizing that the person most qualified to help my daughter was right in front of me, cleaning the floor of my house." Alessandra didn't know what to say. Nothing in her life experience had prepared her for a conversation like this. "For 3 months, Gustavo continued, I treated you as if you were invisible. I yelled at you, disrespected you, acted as if you were less than human. And all the while you were helping my daughter in a way that none of the expensive doctors I hired could. Mr. Victor, please let me finish. For 3 months you endured my humiliation without complaining. You worked for a ridiculous salary that barely pays your bills. You took care of my house and my daughter with a dedication I don't deserve. And even though you were treated like trash, you found a way to help Tatiana because you couldn't stand to see a child suffering without doing anything." Gustavo's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know how many physical therapists I've hired in the last few years? 17. Do you know how much I've spent on treatments that didn't work? Over $500,000. And in 2 weeks of working with you, Tatiana has made more progress than in 2 years of conventional therapy." Alessandra was crying now too. "Mr. Victor, I just wanted to help. She's such a sweet, intelligent girl. When I saw her trying to walk and falling, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I knew I could do something for her. And you did. You gave my daughter hope again. You made her dream again. You made her believe that maybe her life could be different from what the doctor said it would be." Gustavo got up from his chair and began pacing around the office. "But what kills me inside, Alessandra, is knowing that you never told me anything about your education, because I made it clear that you were too inferior to have an opinion, that I created an environment where you preferred to be treated like a maid rather than risk being humiliated for daring to know more than the experts. Mr. Vitor, I understand that you were upset that I did this without authorization. I accept my dismissal." "Dismissal?" Gustavo stopped walking and looked at her. "Alessandra, you've misunderstood something. I'm not firing you. I'm offering you a job." "A job? I want to hire you as Tatiana's private physical therapist. Starting salary of $8,000 per month. Health insurance for you and your family. Meal vouchers, 13th month salary, vacation, all labor rights, and an additional $2,000 bonus for each milestone Tatiana reaches." Alessandra felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. $8,000 per month was almost 7 times more than she earned as a maid. "Mr. Vior, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Alessandra. Say yes and help me give my daughter the chance she deserves." "But you didn't stop reading the report, did you?" Gustavo continued. "Do you want to know what else I found out about you?" Alexandra nodded, still in shock. "I found out that your son Joao came in 3rd place on the NM. I found out that Maria Clara has grades that could get her into any college in the country. I found out that you even sold your diploma to pay for your mother's medicine." She lowered her head, ashamed. "Don't lower your head, Alessandra. Raise your head. You have nothing to be ashamed of. What you did for your children and your mother is heroic. You sacrificed your dreams for theirs. You gave up your career so they could have a chance in life." Gustavo went back behind the desk and opened a drawer. "So, in addition to my salary as a physical therapist, I want to do a few more things. First, I'm going to pay for a full scholarship for Joao to study engineering at Mackenzie. Second, I'm going to pay for a college prep course for Maria Clara, and when she gets into medical school, I'll pay for her entire college education. Alessandra began to cry uncontrollably. Mr. Victor, this is too much. I can't accept it. Yes, you can, Alessandra, and you will accept it because you deserve it, because your children deserve it, and because I need to do this to be able to sleep at night, knowing how I treated you during these 3 months. He took an envelope from the drawer. And there's more. Here is the deed to a 3-bedroom house in Santo Andre, one of the safest areas of the city. The house is yours. You'll never have to pay rent again. It has a bathroom adapted for your mother with physical therapy equipment to help her recovery. Alessandra was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Why? Why are you doing this? Because I spent my whole life thinking that money was power. That social status was what defined a person's worth. That people like you were disposable, replaceable, irrelevant. Gustavo crouched down in front of the chair where she was sitting. But you showed me that I was wrong about everything. You showed me that character is worth more than a bank account, that dignity is worth more than a diploma, that a person who sacrifices everything for their family is richer than any millionaire. He held her hands, calloused from hard work. You saved my daughter, Alessandra. But more than that, you saved me, showed me what kind of man I had become, and gave me a chance to be different. Alessandra looked up at him. Mr. Victor, I don't know if I deserve all this. You deserve this and much more. But there's one condition. A condition? Stop calling me Mr. Victor. My name is Gustavo. For the next 2 hours, they talked like two human beings for the first time. Gustavo asked her about her life, about the dreams she had given up, about the fears that kept her awake at night. Alessandra talked about the daily struggle to keep her family together, about the pain of seeing her children go hungry, about her wounded pride at working in a profession for which she was overqualified. When Marcia arrived from the spa, she found her husband and the maid talking in the office like old friends. She was shocked when Gustavo explained the situation, but when she saw the progress Tatiana had made in recent weeks, she understood that she was witnessing a miracle. That night, when Tatiana went to dinner, she found Alessandra sitting at the table with the family. Alessandra, what are you doing here? She asked, confused. Gustavo smiled. Tatiana, I have news for you. As of today, Alessandra is no longer our maid. She is your official physical therapist. Tatiana looked from one to the other, not understanding. She's a real physical therapist, honey, explained Marcia. Graduated from USP, specializing in pediatric neurology. All this time, she was qualified to help you. Really? Tatiana exclaimed. Alessandra, are you a real physical therapist? Yes, I am, my love. And from now on, we're going to work together every day so you can get stronger and stronger. Can I keep dancing with you? No, you can only dance as you should. Dance therapy will be an official part of your treatment. Tatiana threw herself into Alessandra's lap, crying with joy. Over the following months, the transformation was complete. Alessandra moved into a new house and, for the first time in years, had a room all to herself. Her mother was admitted to a private clinic for intensive treatment and began to show signs of improvement that doctors had considered impossible. João entered engineering school and became one of the best students in his class. Maria Clara passed the entrance exam for medical school at USP in second place, fulfilling a dream she thought would never be possible. But the biggest transformation happened to Tatiana, with proper treatment from someone who really understood her condition. She made spectacular progress. Within months, she was walking without support. Within a year, she was running. Within 2 years, she was dancing ballet on a real stage, wearing the white tutu of her dreams, while a packed audience gave her a standing ovation. And Gustavo? Gustavo discovered that being truly rich had nothing to do with money in the bank. It had to do with recognizing the value of the people around him, treating everyone with dignity, and using his privileges to make a difference in the lives of those in need. He created a foundation to help qualified professionals who had abandoned their careers for family reasons to return to the job market. He offered refresher courses, scholarships, and relocation opportunities. In 5 years, the foundation had already helped more than 1,000 families. 3 years later, in a moving ceremony at his mansion, Gustavo presented Alessandra with a framed diploma. It was not the diploma she had sold years ago to buy medicine. It was a new diploma from a specialization course in dance therapy that she had completed with honors. At the graduation party, when Tatiana danced a special performance she had choreographed herself, there was not a dry eye in the audience. The girl the doctors said would never walk was dancing with the grace of a professional ballerina, and beside her, her first and best teacher, cried with pride. After the performance, Alessandra approached Gustavo. "Do you know," she said, smiling, "there's something I never told you." "What is it? The first day I worked at your house, when you yelled at me because I accidentally broke a glass? I almost quit." "Really? Why didn't you?" "Because that same afternoon I saw you playing with Tatiana in the garden. I saw how you looked at her with so much love, so much devotion. And I thought, a man who loves his daughter like that can't be completely bad. He must just be lost." And I was, wasn't I? You were, but sometimes we need to get lost to find our way home. Gustavo looked around the party. Tatiana was dancing with her school friends. Joao was talking about college projects with other young people. Maria Clara was explaining to a group of adults how she intended to specialize in pediatric neurology. Alessandra's mother was in a special wheelchair, smiling and applauding her adopted granddaughter. "Do you know what the most important day of my life was, Alessandra?" "What was it?" "The day I saw you dancing with my daughter was the day I discovered that there is a difference between looking and seeing." "How so?" "For 3 months, I looked at you and saw only a maid. But on that day, I finally saw who you really were. And when I learned to see you, I learned to see everyone around me." He paused. "I learned to see the building doorman, who has a degree in history but works at the front desk to support his 3 children. I learned to see the office cleaner, who is paying for law school by working nights. I learned to see the driver, who is an award-winning poet in his spare time. And you learned to see yourself too," Alessandra said. "It was the hardest lesson of all, to discover that I had become exactly the kind of person I would despise if I met them on the street. But you've changed, Gustavo, and that's what matters." That night, when everyone had left, Gustavo stayed alone in the garden, thinking about how his life had changed. Years ago, he was a rich and miserable man, surrounded by people who pretended to like him out of self-interest, treating employees like objects and watching his daughter waste away without being able to help her. Today, he was a rich and happy man, surrounded by people who truly respected him, who worked with him and not for him, and who had taught him that leadership is not about having power over people, but about using power to elevate people. His daughter not only walked but ran, jumped, danced, and dreamed of a bright future. More importantly, she had learned from an early age that a person's value is not measured by what they have, but by who they are. And it all started with a simple dance on a Tuesday afternoon, when he finally saw beyond appearances and discovered that the most valuable person in his home was the one he treated as if she were invisible. If you've made it this far, you may be wondering if stories like this really happen. The answer is yes. Every day, there are extraordinary people around us disguised as ordinary people. There are heroes hidden behind simple uniforms, geniuses working in jobs that don't do justice to their talent, noble souls fighting silently to keep their families together. The question is, are you looking or are you seeing? Are you only seeing the role that people play? Or are you seeing who they really are beneath the surface? Gustavo Victor learned the hard way that pride and prejudice are luxuries that cost too much, that judging people by their appearance is wasting opportunities to meet extraordinary human beings, that treating someone as inferior is diminishing yourself. But he also learned that it's never too late to change, that recognizing mistakes is the first step to fixing them, that apologizing is not a sign of weakness, but of strength, and that sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the people society teaches us to ignore. The story of Gustavo and Alessandra reminds us that every person who crosses our path carries within them a unique story, unique dreams, unique talents. That the woman who cleans the office may be a brilliant writer, that the man who delivers pizza may be an inspired musician, that the person who works at the cash register may be a born leader waiting for an opportunity. And it reminds us above all that compassion, respect, and dignity are not expensive commodities that only rich people can afford. They are choices we make every day in every interaction with every person we meet. Because in the end, we are all more alike than we are different. We all have fears, dreams, struggles, and hopes. We all deserve to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. And we all have something valuable to offer the world. If only someone would take the time to look beyond appearances. The next time you meet someone in a position that society considers inferior, remember Alessandra's story. Remember that behind that uniform, there may be an extraordinary human being, waiting for someone who has the eyes to see. And remember that, as Gustavo discovered, some of life's greatest riches come not from what we can accumulate, but from what we can give. Not from the power we wield over others, but from the power we use to lift others up. This story could have ended differently if Gustavo hadn't learned the difference between looking and seeing. Tatiana might still be struggling to take 3 steps. Alessandra might still be cleaning houses for a salary that barely pays the bills. Joao and Maria Clara could have seen their dreams die for lack of opportunity. But when someone has the courage to admit they were wrong, to truly apologize, and to do whatever it takes to fix their mistakes, miracles happen, lives are transformed, families are rebuilt, and the world becomes a little bit fairer. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you rethink the way you treat the people around you, if it planted a seed of compassion that can blossom into concrete actions, then it has fulfilled its purpose. Because stories like this should not only move us, they should inspire us. They should make us want to be better versions of ourselves. They should remind us that each of us has the power to be the Gustavo who sees, not the Gustavo who just looks. And who knows, maybe the next extraordinary story of transformation and redemption will be yours. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell for more stories that will touch your heart and transform the way you see the world. Because we all need reminders that kindness still exists, that people can still change, and that love always wins in the end.